After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the West countries praised victory of capitalism over socialism. However, they were too early to judge, and that was just the beginning of today's nightmare in economy. It took decades to see the consequences of the economic policies. The UK and US might have chosen a wrong path. What Thatcher and Reagan did was to support rich people. They cut drastically the tax rate on the rich. It did work for some extent, and their economy had boosted, and apparently the West won economy war against the Soviet Union. They might have thought rich people can help float economy. Now that idea was totally an illusion. What had happened was that they were just lucky to be in good economic conditions at the end of the Cold War. After the Cold War, inequality has expanded hugely in the West. However, thanks to cheap labors in other countries, most people in the West countries had not experienced serious problems on poverty during those days very much. Due to the tax rate cuts on the high-income segments, the rich have become far richer than middle-class people. But most people didn't notice that because cheap products have been imported from China or other countries. Today's inflation has largely been caused by the huge government spending to fill the gap between supply and demand in macroeconomy. It's quite easy to understand that most of the people from low to middle income don't have enough money to support economy if their tax rate is relatively higher than the rich. That's what is going on now. Thanks to low tax rate on high-income people, the rich can be richer, but they spend less and less to support economy. To fix supply and demand gap in macroeconomy, we need high tax rate on rich people. Nothing is simple as that. Instead, governments issued huge public bonds to fill the gap. In the last decades, China has become an economy giant from an underdeveloped country. If there were no investments from the West, that would not happen so fast. The rich people invested in stock markets, as you see in the city in London. UK economy had been booming after Thatcher's deregulation. That also caused many companies to look for cheap labors around the world to keep their stock prices high. For decades, unnoticed by people, most people in the UK or the US have been becoming poorer and poorer because many major companies have been outsourcing globally. Unlike other European countries, the UK is supporting the US policies. The UK has to support the proxy war by the US all the time. In April, the Prime Minister of the UK stopped peace negotiation between Russia and Ukraine. Why? Because Americans and English people speak the same language. Period. They are far easier to trade with each other than with other European countries. The UK doesn't want the dollar to collapse, so she is supporting the proxy war by the US. The British can't tolerate de-dollarization, so Russia is their enemy because Russia has ditched the US Treasury bonds. Recently, the Conservative Party failed a new economic reform. They tried to implement another Thatcherism once again. Thatcherism looks so successful under very limited conditions of Cold War era economy always fails if a nation expand inequality by making the rich richer. That's what Thatcherism had actually done. Thatcher was so lucky that she didn't see the devastating consequences of her policies. Thatcherism was doomed to end up with huge national debts because it widens the supply-demand gap in the economy. It looks like boosting economy, but it just consuming human resources in and out of the country using cheap labors. Economy is not sustainable as long as inequality is expanding. UK has to fix the economical policies to end this, but it will take another decades of economy turmoils. If the governments won't do this, in decades or so the country will plunge into the third world. However, it's highly unlikely that people would accept a long economy depression to fix the problem.